So in part one, I was talking about the time in graduate school when I was in a position defending a series of papers by Stephen Jay Gould against a sort of anti-Gould opponent, and had my ass literally handed to me. It was disgraceful, and I know the first thing that'll come to people's mind is, well, that's because you're an idiot. And had I been there, I would have defended Gould adequately. Um, it wasn't like that. Okay, this had nothing to do with my skills or my knowledge of Gould, really. I mean, this had to do with the fact that I had no idea how the criticisms that have been lobbied against him by actual real people working in the field. One example that comes to mind, but this is that the person I was discussing this with, or having this public discourse with, brought up that Stephen Jay Gould, has, claiming himself to be the, leader of the evolutionary biologists or the voice of reason or something like that. He made some comment like that. Anyway, and I had a paper written by a creationist making that claim. So I was like, ha, I got you. Checkmate. I said, you can't hold Stephen Jay Gould accountable for what creationists have said about him. They call him the leader, just like they call Dawkins, anti-atheists will call Dawkins our leader. Same kind of thing. I said, you can't hold him accountable for what these idiots are calling him. And I was like very happy and smug in my able to bring that paper up. And he pulls out a paper by Stephen Jay Gould. I don't remember which of them it is. And it says, it was this about how I was handed the mantle of leader of the evolutionary biological community, their spokesperson, whatever. And I'm just like, it was just like this deflation. I was just like, oh my God, you did claim that, you asshole. It was like, okay, my arguments are out the window. All right, forget it. I'm not defending this guy anymore. He claimed to be the spokesperson for evolutionary biology and a de facto leader of the community. That kind of thing. So, but okay. But to go to some positive things, I do want to emphasize that I think that this popularization of science is overall a good thing, and Gould was one of the best at that. Gould's essays were read by millions. Lots of people who wouldn't know anything about science or the science of evolution and history of science and such, knew a lot more thanks to Gould's work. I think that popularization can go a little bit too far. I think that popularization can be mixed up with actual researchers. People, like I myself was there, believing that Gould was, really a shaker and mover in the field when he wasn't. I mean, he did work in that field, but he wasn't. He was just one of a huge number of people working. What made him different was that he wrote popular science articles, and that's really important to keep in mind. Like I said, we haven't had cable television in our house for a decade or more, actually probably 15 years, and now we do for the first time because it came with our internet. And so I'm suddenly watching this Animal Planet and Discovery Channel and the Learning Channel and stuff for the first time. I'm just appalled at how much garbage is being presented as science. And I think that that's a big concern. There's a lot of... I'm amazed at the people they call, zoologists. It's like, it's not a zoologist, but that kind of thing. But that's the whole aside. I think maybe that's an extreme version of this pop science thing. But I'm not trying to knock what Gould has done. And the thing is about it, this issue comes down to black and white. Very little, if anything in the world, is actually black and white. This is right, this is wrong. It's almost always shades of gray in between them. So if I randomly pick an essay by Gould, chances are it's not absolutely incorrect. He's got a lot of real information in there. And The Wonderful Life is a great example of it. The problem is that Gould words these things in a way that makes them out to be black and white, if that makes sense. Okay? that that's what gets that's what makes a lot of his stuff get to be the point of being unreadable. He has to word these statements as if these people are all wrong and this person's all right. If he's talking about some history of science, if he's discussing, I don't know, the germ theory of disease, he'll talk about, the rigorous status quo that refused to acknowledge these brave young scientists, this kind of thing. He has to word it that way. And he always words these things that way. And it gives this false impression about how paradigm changes occur in science, about how things alter. I mean, whether it be punctuated equilibrium or anything, the way that this change occurs isn't often that. It's not this revolution. It's more often than not a gradual change that happens in science. As a paper gets published, it gets criticized. The critics test it. They can't dispute it. It gains some weight. Other studies verify it. And it slowly gains acceptance in the field until eventually it's looked at as part of the theory. Rarely is the old things thrown out either. I mean, they're often punctuated equilibrium is an important part of the story of evolution. It's not the whole story. That's a great example of that. So I think that's where Gould gets himself in trouble. In fact, in this Panda's Thumb, he has an article in here, page 80 something, on carrying groups and selfish genes, where he really it's where the sort of the origin of the dispute between Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould started, and he gets into some lots and lots of detail, but he strawmans Dawkins. If you've read Selfish Gene, and then you read what Gould's summary of Selfish Gene, you'll see that these two don't resemble each other very closely. He'll take some quotes from Dawkins, but it's just really a straw man because it's a very extreme view. It's a very, Dawkins talks about genes being a unit of selection, not the only unit of selection, not the final reductionist unit of selection. And Gould counters that with an example of how some genes cooperate and are critically working together, these synergistic effects of certain genes. So therefore, Dawkins is all wrong. Well, Dawkins would be all wrong if he had said that can't exist. Dawkins acknowledges that exists. So it's Gould's straw man that's wrong, not what Dawkins said. And I'm not saying I support Dawkins in that exactly all the way either. My point is that he has to Gould paints it as this absolute issue. And that got Gould into, Daniel Dennett opposed Gould's, really had a big problem with that. I'm a big fan of Dennett. If you look at, just a good number of people working in actual genetics, Gould was full of crap about a lot of what he said about it. And again, Gould is not a geneticist. And it doesn't mean that everything he said is wrong, but it also doesn't mean that all he said is right. And that's a big problem. Gould was one to think that he was correct. Okay. So I'm going to just finish this up real quick here with one, I'm not going to part 3, about I had mentioned about my encounter with Gould on a personal level. And this happened many, many years ago. But I had an opportunity I went to a lecture series by Gould, and it was great. It was on spandrels and adaptations, and it was just a great talk. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And afterwards, saw him like sort of standing around, and I was like, wow. So I went up and shook his hand and had him autograph my book for me. It was, and I was talking about this example of that I thought was the best example of what he was discussing, were the fact that this evolutionary constraint of malacostracan crustaceans, with only having 19 somites, called segments, but 19 somites, and because they only have 19, and that's fixed, there's no exceptions to that rule within the Eumalacostraca. They have to, crabs, shrimp, lobsters, isopods, amphipods, all have creative ways of using that rule to expand their diversity. I mean, they've did all kinds of different little evolutionary tricks, and I think it's a perfect example of it. But before I could even get that out, within seconds of me saying 19 somites, segment somites is a close equivalency. He interrupts me and goes, they have 20. And I'm like, no, actually they have 19. And then he goes, no, you're absolutely wrong. It's 20. And I was like, well, anyway, I just kind of said, okay, I'm going to let you have that. And I didn't say that, but I was just like, and I went to go on, and before I could even get another couple of sentence out, he was just like, it is 20. Like, really, like mockingly, it's kind of like smug mocking. And it was like, actually, no, it's 19, and he was like, it's 20. And I was like, well, that's not important. And he goes, it is 20. Like, he wasn't going to stop, he wasn't going to let me finish until I admitted there was 20, which damned if I'm going to say something that's wrong. Anyway, and I finally just kind of took my book and I was like, okay, nice meeting you, thank you, and I walked away thinking, we're an asshole. Anyway, that's it. Take care, guys.